it's Miss Kristina again with the Orange County Children's Therapeutic Arts Center. So in this series of continuing online lessons, we're learning about how to draw each feature of the face so we can put it all together to create a realistic portrait. So just a reminder, a portrait is a drawing, painting, or photograph of somebody's face, their neck, and their shoulders. So it's the upper portion of their body. In this section today, we're going to be learning about how to draw the nose. So let's get started. In our continued series about portraiture, our next step after learning how to draw the eyes is learning how to draw a three-dimensional realistic nose. So the nose is really interesting to draw because it has a lot of flat planes that model light and shadow. So I'm going to show you some tips and techniques to draw that realistically. So what you'll need today is a piece of regular paper. I have some heavyweight drawing paper, but you can use any paper that you have at home. You're going to need a pencil. Any pencil will do. There's a lot of different types of pencils. But for now, just a regular 2B or 2HB standard like school pencil is totally good. You might need a pencil sharpener. I always have one close by. And you'll need an eraser, any type of eraser. I just use like a rubber normal eraser. And I really like these fancy kneaded erasers. They're kind of like silly putty, but they erase. They're really great. You can shape them into like any shape that you need to erase like tiny areas. So they're really good. So get all your materials together and let's get started drawing. So the first thing I did was to turn my paper the tall way. This is called the portrait orientation. When it goes this way instead of the other way, which is called the landscape orientation. So we're going to start sketching. Grab your pencils. Remember to start by sketching really, really light because we're going to be erasing and changing things as we go along. You want to draw your nose pretty big. We want to fill up most of the paper. So think about how big you're going to draw it. You don't want it to be super tiny, but you don't want to make it so big that it maybe goes off the paper. So I'm going to start by drawing kind of in the lower portion of the paper. And I'm going to start by lightly sketching a circle. So when I'm drawing circles, I like to just let my hand kind of go around and around over and over again, really lightly. I'm not trying to make it perfect. So what I do is I make all these lines, and then when it starts to look like a pretty good circle, I take my eraser and I just erase some of the extra lines. So that way it takes a lot of the pressure off trying to make a perfect circle the first time around, because I don't want to waste time trying to make something that's perfect. I want to start drawing, and I want to make a lot of progress on my artwork. So that circle's pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to do a lot more steps along the way. So start with your circle. Then we're going to make two lines that are for the bridge of the nose. So that's the stiff bone that leads up to the eyes. So we're going to sketch two very light straight lines that go on either side of the circle and go up towards the top of the paper. So again, I'm using the side of my pencil like we talked about in our last lesson, sketching really lightly and not trying to make it perfect, not worrying or being attached to how it looks at this stage because we're going to do a lot more steps. So next, we're going to start to draw the sides of the nose and the nostrils. So the sides of the nose are really interesting because there's the light and shadow on that part of the nose is pretty complex. So what we're going to do is first make kind of like two light oval shapes on either sides of the nose. Remember, just like how we did our circle, go around and around. You can erase your lines later or make them darker later on when we get to the shading. So now I have 2 lightly sketched circles. What I'm going to do now is make some lines across this part of the bottom part of the nose that will help me later when I'm trying to shade and add shadows. So now I'm going to make a couple lines on this middle part of the nose. So I'm going to make 2 lines that angle in like that, and then I'm going to draw a straight line across like this. So it's kind of like the bottom shape of a hexagon. So if you're looking at a hexagon like this, hexagon has 6 sides. This part is going to be the shape that we're going to put on that bottom section of the nose, just this bottom portion. So we're kind of making an angular hexagonal shape right here. Then we're going to make 2 lines that cut these ovals on the side in half. So kind of like this. We want those to be angled lines, and that's going to help us do our shadows later on. And we're going to want to make the nose now a little more angular instead of round. It will help us do the shading a little later on. So I'm going to make kind of like, you know, more of a hexagon shape like this. So I'm going to make this a little pointed as well. And I'm going to angle it in towards the bridge of the nose like this, just so there's a straight line that shows the different planes of the nose where light and shadow hit. So it's going to help me a lot later to plan out my drawing this way. Next, we can make some lines that show where the nostrils are supposed to be. So if this is going to be the bottom part of the nose, we want our nostrils to come up and sit right in this part of the nose in those 2 ovals that we drew. So I always call it kind of like a loop. So if I'm just gonna continue my line from the bottom here. I'm gonna come up in this oval shape and make a little loop. It kind of looks like a cursive P. So like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and I'm going to try to make these look pretty equal. I'm going to try to make my nostrils the same size and shape if I can on either side. And I'm going to connect that shape to this bottom part of the nose. So you can see we already have the bottom part of the nose, the start of the sides of the nostrils, and the bridge of the nose. So we only have a couple more steps of like little lines to make just for guidance, and then we're going to start shading to make it look more realistic. So next, we're going to make a couple lines that will just be for guidance and help us determine where some of the shadows go later. So we're going to make 2 lines on either side of the nose coming up from the nostrils like this. And that one's a little curved, so I'm going to erase it, try to make it a little straighter. So these lines ultimately are kind of going to disappear. We're just going to use them to help us show where the shadows are going to go. And then I'm going to angle those lines in towards the bridge of the nose like this. And I'm going to use my pencil to try to make that line the same as this line here. So remember we made this line, that angled line. Try to make the angle of that line the same as the one on the top. You don't want one line to be more straight and one line to be more crooked. Try to make them pretty similar. Next, we're going to make a straight line across the bridge of the nose. And then we're going to make a shape. I believe this is a trapezoid. We're going to make a shape like this and make a straight line across the top like that. So what these lines tell us, these two lines on the side are going to be the side planes of the nose. They're going to be heavily in shadow. And then this space actually on either side of this shape at the top, this is where the eyes would normally go. So what this does is kind of create a space that the eyes would go in a regular drawing. And this is one of the like lower planes of the start of the forehead. So these little sketch lines give us a lot of information. And actually, I might want to change mine a little bit. I want these lines to go up a little more so that I have a little more room for that eye socket space there. So I'm gonna erase a tiny bit. Okay, so now I have a little bit bigger area for that space, the bottom plane of the forehead. And now that we structured our nose, we're going to start drawing and shading. So remember last time we learned about value, and value is the range from light to dark in a drawing. So the lower numbers, 0, 1, and 2, are the really light values. They're almost white. And the higher numbers, 8, 9, and 10, are the darker values. They're almost black. So we learned about that in our eye drawing tutorial. So we're going to start by lightly shading. Remember, loosen your grip on your pencil. You want to hold it lightly. Don't grasp it really tight. You want to hold it at an angle to the paper. Remember, not straight on like this, where you get sharp lines. We want soft lines. So remember, the key to shading is going back and forth and trying to make your pencil marks almost disappear with how even you are pushing down on your pencil. So you want an even amount of pressure. And we're going to start by shading the sides of the nose. So this area on either side of the bridge of the nose, take your pencil and lightly go back and forth to make that really nice, gentle gray. Try to make it really even. If you notice some parts of your shading are darker or lighter, you can go back with your pencil and try to even out some of those areas. So it's all one nice, smooth gray. So do the same thing on the other side. And we're also going to shade in this shape at the top. Now that we've done our shading, we're going to work on blending. So we learned about blending in our last episode about drawing realistic eyes. So for blending, remember we take our finger and we're going to rub over all the areas that we did shading in little circles to smooth out all those pencil lines and to blend our pencil really smoothly into the white areas of the paper so we get a wider range of values. So the little circle technique works really well. And notice how I'm overlapping on the white areas of my drawing and blending into those spaces so it looks really smooth, and it's going to make my shadows look really realistic. So for now, I'm just going to leave this as it is. I might add a little more shading and blend again later, but I want to get to the bottom part of the nose so that I can tell what values to make the rest of the drawing. Because some of these areas down here are going to be darker than up here. So I have these nice shadows, the white bridge of the nose. Now I'm going to start shading the bottom part of the nose. So this whole bottom part under these angular marks that we made is going to be in shadow. So I'm going to start shading the bottom part of the nose. And I'm going to want this to be a little darker than the rest of the shading that we did up there. I'm going to shade it one more time before I blend. And I'm actually going to take my eraser before I do any blending and erase these little pencil lines on the inside of the nose that I don't need anymore. So erase that first circle that we made, the top of the first circle. We're not going to need that line. And I still have a little leftover lines from those ovals that we made too. I'm going to erase those as well. Now I'm going to blend the bottom part of the nose just like we did at the top. Except I'm not going to go outside the lines so much as I did before because there's a little more structure on the bottom of the nose than there is at the top. So I'm going to try to keep those angles that we made as our guiding lines, just so the nose has shadows in the right places. So now I'm actually going to use my eraser and clean up some of these edges a little bit like we did in our last video. So I'm going to go, if I went outside the lines around the bottom, I'm going to use my eraser, go around those edges, and just make sure that those shapes are how I want them. They're sharp edges like that. So I blended. Now I want to make my nostrils the darkest part of this drawing. So remember yesterday when we talked about value? The darkest value, I want to be right in the middle of those nostrils. So I'm going to shade those in pretty dark. So now that I'm done shading the inside of the nostrils, I want to blend them a little bit, just like before. Not as much though, and since this pencil is darker, we pressed a little harder, it won't smudge as much into the areas around it. So if this is the darkest part of our drawing, we want to make some of the other areas of our drawing a little bit darker so that the whole artwork comes together. So we're going to want to make a little bit of a darker area on this bottom part of the nose. So I'm going to add some shading that starts here up near the side, and it's going to go down, and I'm going to shade this bottom ball area of the nose a little bit more so it has a darker shadow. I'm not going to shade all the way up to where we blended before. I'm going to shade a little bit lower so that this part here stays really smooth. So I'm only going to shade this bottom area. And if you need to erase a little bit, if you blended outside the lines, feel free to do that. And I'm going to want to add a little bit more shadow here in the corners of the nostrils. So I'm going to add some shading here also. So see how much darker I'm shading now? And I'm just following the shape that we made before when we were doing those guidelines to make the shapes of our nostrils. So I'm going to shade on both sides so that the corners of those nostrils stand out a little more, and I'm still keeping that shape on the side of the nose too. So shade and blend. I'm also going to want the bottom part of this nostril to be darker too. So I'm going to add more shading around and underneath the nostril. And I'm going to add a little bit of darker lines that go from the nostril and go underneath the nose. So I'm going to add a shadow under the nose also, but I want this line that goes underneath the bottom of the nose to be a little darker to make it stand out a little more like that. And then I'm going to blend the sides of the nose. And actually underneath the nose, there's this little shape that's in between the bottom of the nose and the top of the upper lip. And it kind of looks like this. It kind of looks like the shape of like a bell. So I'm going to very lightly sketch in that little shape underneath the nose, just like that. So I'm going to now add a shadow underneath the nose, and then I'm going to make these lines under the nostrils a little bit darker too. Actually, maybe I want to do that first. So just like I made the line under the bottom of the nose a little darker, I'm going to use the side of my pencil, make these lines under the nostrils a little bit darker too, so they stand out a lot. And then I'm going to add a shadow under the nose. So I added my shadow underneath the nose. I'm going to now blend that shadow in. So just like how we blended up here to make these really soft edges, I'm going to blend these shadows so they kind of dissolve into the white paper around them. I'm also going to want to now shade again right under the nose, make those shadows a little bit darker. Also, just a reminder, if you haven't sharpened your pencil yet, you probably want to sharpen your pencil with all the shading. It gets dull really fast. Always make sure that your pencil stays with a pretty good point, because it's no fun to draw with a dull pencil. So now shade again right underneath the nose, a little darker this time, and don't shade as far down as you shaded before. This shadow will be smaller and closer to the nose, like this. And you might want to make the shadow in the middle part of the nose go down a little more, just so we can see the shape of the nose. Try to keep your shading really even, and then blend. And I'm going to want to add a tiny bit more shading on that little bell shape that we drew under the nose, but only on one side, so it looks like there's a bit of a shadow. And if I need to use my eraser to clean up some of the shading that had maybe gone too far, I can lightly use my eraser. Fix my shading a little bit more. Okay. And I'm going to want to add a little more shading on the bottom edge of the nose too. So when I'm drawing realistically and trying to get a full range of values, there's always this back and forth. I start with the light parts and slowly, gradually shade more and more to get to these darker values. It takes time, and it takes time to build up those layers. So it's oftentimes shading and blending is something you have to do more than once. So I'm going to add a little more shading to this bottom part of the drawing on the underside of the nose. I might make this shadow right under the nose even darker. So take a few minutes to do that on your drawing too. All right, so now that I'm done with the shading on the bottom of the nose, I'm going to add a tiny bit more shading up here at the corner of actually where the eyes would go. So I'm going to add a little bit of shading here and a little bit of shading on the other side also. And maybe a tiny bit in the middle to kind of round out that bridge of the nose. And then I'm going to blend. And I'm going to add a tiny bit more of a shadow on one side of the nose. I'm going to do the left side like this. I'm going to make this a little bit darker just so it looks like there's a tiny bit more of a shadow. I'm going to blend, and then I'm going to bring part of this shadow with my finger over across the nose here. So it kind of looks like the ball part of the nose at the bottom. It stands out a little bit more. So it makes it look like there's different planes of the nose that are hitting and receiving light. There. So almost done. I'm just going to add a final few couple shadows. And then if you lost any of the white parts in your drawing, if you blended so much that the white parts start to look a little gray and dirty, use your eraser now, only a little bit. We're gonna add the final highlights. So the highlights make it look like light is hitting the nose. We wanna add some on this side of the nostril, only on the top. So I'm erasing a little bit. On the other side of the nostril, in the same place. On the ball of the nose, we want to make sure there is a little white spot. And on the bridge of the nose, we might want to erase a little bit up there too. So those are the spots that should reflect a lot of light. You want to leave those really white, so you don't want to lose the light on those places of the nose. So after all those final touches, I would say our nose is complete. So look around if there's any gray smudgy areas on the white part of your drawing. Take some time, erase the background a little bit. Sometimes it gets a little messy. So clean up your background, and our drawing is finished. With two features of the face confidently under our belts, the eyes and the nose, we're getting closer and closer to being able to draw our full portrait drawing. So the next things that we're going to learn are how to draw mouths and how to draw ears. And after that, we'll be able to wrap it all together into a full portrait drawing of someone's head, their face, their neck, and their shoulders. So I can't wait to see us put everything together and use all the skills that we've learned. Keep practicing this week, and I can't wait to share some new tips and tricks with you next time. See you soon.